little over 50 people joining us today, I think, who have already joined, and they're still coming in. So thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to start the program as we speak. The technical problem we have is our guest, Noshihle, down at the bottom of the screen there. Unfortunately, the link's not working, so she's using Tanya's link, but she will introduce herself shortly. So we're here today thanks to the Thought Leadership Foundation, which is a body brought together by some very aspiring organizations. And the objective of the foundation and today's session is really about knowledge sharing and specifically thought leadership. And we have two very sometimes outspoken guests today. And so we're going to kick off the session straight into it. Tanya, I'm going to ask you first, if you wouldn't mind, just give a quick overview of your career in the contact center industry. I think going as far back as you can remember. Your personal journey, your current sort of role and position. And then we're going to ask you, kicking off with, what do you think are the biggest challenges facing the contact center and customer experience industry in South Africa today? So very briefly, over to you for a second.
Thank you very much, Rod. Delighted to be here and joining you this morning. So thank you for the invitation. Just very briefly, started my contact center career many years ago, probably about 25 years ago, actually in the call center, and was originally, so my backdrop was originally HR and training, was really my area of specialization. Very quickly moved into operations, where I spent the bulk of my career, and most of that, by the way, in the outsourcing BPO industry and space. And then left that, and well, my CEO at the time started an analytics company. So for 4 years, I went into the world of data analytics and AI and machine learning. And then about 2 years ago, joined Pivotal Data, where I'm now the COO. So that is very much in a nutshell, a 30-second elevator pitch. Into, you know what, I think this is very topical for many reasons. I think one, we will unpack it, but I think some of the challenges in my mind around quality is getting rid of the shackles of the old traditional, what I call transactional quality methodology. So, you know, it wasn't so long ago, we wrote lots of, we kind of wanted to quantify quality as a science. So we said you had to do certain things to achieve a quality outcome. And somewhere along the line, we lost the art of quality, the art of human engagement, the art of customer satisfaction. And I think one of the biggest challenges is now saying, you know what, we've got so many, we've enabled ourselves with tools, technology, thinking, and yet in certain environments, we are actually regressing and not progressing, where we're putting in more scripts, we're automating our people more, we're not leveraging the human being, the capacity to have empathy, to create human connection, to be innovative, to be creative. And then we question why we are not getting the customer ratings, why our customers aren't happy, why are we not getting resolution? And I think it's because there's a huge disconnect in terms of what we measure, how we measure, how we should be aligning our quality, our tactical quality approach to a proper strategy that links to those key drivers of customer satisfaction. So we'll probably unpack some of those today, but I'd say those are some of the key challenges I think that we face in this.
Okay, and I'm going to ask you a bit more about that later, because I know you've got some fairly contentious views on some of those dimensions of it. My second guest today is Noshihle, got it right. She's sitting down in Durban at the moment. And we apologize, you'll see the name up there is Tanya's, she's using Tanya's link. There was a problem with the particular link for her. So, Noshihle, why don't you also give us a little bit of background? I know you've been 13 or 14 years in the contact center industry. And today, I believe you focus on quality and the use of AI in quality and compliance. So we're very interested to, if you just share with us very briefly, your background and then also your views on the problems facing the industry at the moment. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rod. Today I'm hijacking Tanya's name. So I'll be Tanya Phillips for the rest of the session. I've been in the contact center industry for about 13 years and have been in the quality space for 11, 12 years of that. I started in the quality industry as in operations in the sales environment. That lasted for about a year and a half, and then I moved into the quality space. And I always say moving into the quality space was the best thing that could have ever happened to me at that time, because this environment or this space is exciting, and the changes that we're going through in the industry is also very exciting. My current role right now, I'm the artificial intelligence manager in the quality space. I moved into that a couple of months ago, but we've been working with implementing the AI tools into our business for the past year. The challenges in the contact center industry, for now, I wouldn't say it's a challenge. I say it's opportunities. Before, we didn't have this many interactions with our customers, and now everybody is interacting in different ways and forms. Before, it used to be just, in a call space. Now you've got all different types of mediums where we can touch our customers. So as the contact center industry, we've had to adjust and see how we can get to more people without just using one means or way of talking. And that's where the omni-channel and all the other wonderful tools come into play. So it's actually challenges on how do we adapt, how do we get to more customers, how do we provide world-class service without always speaking to our customers.
Noshihle, just to give us some scope on this, what is the size of your operation that you are monitoring from a quality and compliance point of view? And if my understanding is correct, it's predominantly outbound. Am I correct?
It's predominantly outbound. We've got some inbound, sizable inbound as well. We have about 1,003 agents, sales and inbound and in all the other sorts of interaction agents in the business. And we have about 40, plus minus 40 QA assessors, and a wonderful AI tool that has helped us to assess all of these agents with the minimum number of QA people that we have.
Great stuff. We'll move on to the use of technology in QA and compliance a little later in this session. Tanya, back to you. You mentioned when we were chatting the other day that you have some views on traditional quality mechanisms, the old tick sheet and Excel spreadsheets, and in terms of both quality and compliance. Why don't you expand on that? You actually said to me, traditional monitoring is a waste of time. I might agree with you on that one, but I'd be really interested in your views, and from a strategic point of view, over to you.
Sure. So I think, Rod, if we just unpack some of the inherent flaws with that kind of manual tick sheet, that transactional quality approach. And if you think about it, it's very one-dimensional. It looks at the agent and it kind of says, we're ticking our own homework and we listen to the call, and invariably what we do is we say, did the agent do everything they needed to do? Did they, say the right greeting and all and what we are trying to achieve is not wrong. However, what happens is in that traditional space, very often when quality fails, it's not as a result of the agent. And yet what we do is we don't capture other reasons for the quality failing, because what we do is, well, two things happen. I don't know if I've been in enough organizations to know that when a complaint hits the CEO's desk, or hello Peter, or something, that gets a lot of attention,
everybody runs around.
The natural reaction is also, what is going on in the contact center? What is wrong with your agents? What are you going to do, Mr. Call Center Manager, or Noshihle, for example, a head of quality, to improve our agents? And we haven't quantified what the actual problem is. Is it truly the agents that aren't knowledgeable, that aren't empowered to resolve the issue at hand, for example? Or is it more than that? Is there a process that is preventing resolution? What are those processes? Is it incorrect information? Is there misalignment with the the marketing material. But what we do is we default to, if there's a quality problem, it must be an agent problem. And we don't capture enough
Okay, can I
information.
jump in there quickly? Because I know you come from an analytical background. Just top of mind, in your opinion, of serious complaints, let's put them into a bucket. What percentage, in your opinion, roughly speaking, do you think is agent manageable or agent responsibility and organization versus organizational responsibility, organizational processes, standards?
So it varies, and I'll give you a couple of examples. So what I found is, so I'll give you one example. It was in the BPO space. We were doing work on behalf of a UK company. And when we did the analysis, we said actually 9% of the issues were resolved first time round. And you can imagine the furor that created, because it was completely different to the first call resolution number that we were touting. But what we were able to unpack is to say, the process you have in place is that the customer phones the contact center, the agent has to make an appointment. Between you and I, that thing that needs to be fixed is not fixed until the engineer or whoever it is goes on site, fixes the actual whatever was broken, and the customer then says, my issue is resolved. So let's break that down for a second. Did the agent do what they needed to do? Yes, they made an appointment. From a customer's point of view, is that issue resolved? Well, we don't know on that first call. So again, it's the metrics we use and the way we interpret that, where we have to say to ourselves, first call resolution, of course it's important, but how does that compare to true issue resolution? And why we need to ask that question is because we have to understand the purpose of the contact center, the value that we add to the organization. If we have built the processes that we are really just a glorified switchboard, then we need to acknowledge that and have the metrics that show that as a glorified switchboard, we are doing the best job in the world. But if we're saying we are a strategic differentiator, a customer care department or customer experience department, what does that mean for the organization? And then in turn, what do you measure and demonstrate the value into the company?
Let's bounce this ball back to you, Noshihle. You're in a hardcore sales environment, no doubt being driven by targets and expectations from the executives, which may well be in conflict with your view of quality, and certainly from an agent's point of view. So your views on that?
So traditional QA, I think it worked for quite a while, and it worked because it's what was there. It's what we could use at that point in time. But if you fast forwarding and taking it back to the space that we are in now, what information do we actually get from the traditional QA? You are going to look at, did the agent say A, B, C, and D? Tick, tick, tick. It's 100% fine. But what are you're unable to get valuable insights from ticking. You're unable to get from what are customers saying or information of what are customers complaining about, what processes are not working. You're unable to get that from a tick sheet mechanism. However, if you're using different kinds, then you're able to take those insights and implement them into your space to prevent all of these high escalated complaints.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
sorry.
That said, back to Tanya, you also mentioned earlier different quality metrics. Now, how have quality metrics, those KPIs that we send up to the boardroom and nobody ever reads, how has that changed in the last, let's call it the last 10 years within the operations that you're familiar with?
So Rod, there's been a move, and I think it's about what is most important. And if you think about it, well, this is my opinion. My opinion in the quality space, we want to achieve two things. We want to ultimately drive customer satisfaction, because the number one metric that counts is what your customer thinks about your quality, as opposed to what you think about your quality. That's the number, so metrics that have come to the fore that are far more relevant is, for example, customer satisfaction metrics or customer effort or NPS. But what is important is for a company to say, do I want to measure all of these, some of these, and again, why? What am I doing with the information that I get, and how does this link to the strategy that I'm driving. So if loyalty, and NPS is a contentious little number, let's be honest, because very often that pendulum can swing. And again, as Nozi said, it's just a number. And if you don't have verbatim, it's very hard to understand why all of a sudden this week your customers are less loyal than last week. So, and what we are seeing is it's the answers is in the power of the data that you get. And that single number, whether that be quality assurance 97% or is not enough.
It tells you nothing, really.
Exactly, or to drive change, Noshihle, exactly what you were saying. So the metrics, I don't want to dictate what companies measure. I'm saying measure what's important to you, but make sure that the customer's opinion, the customer's view of how you're performing is core to your quality strategy. And what we have found very often is whenever you try and do a correlation between the internal QA score, your 97% that you're kind of telling the board, and you have a look at your CSAT or your NPS, there's always this gap. And the gap is, as I said, is inherent because one, we're kind of marking our own homework. Two, we're looking at it from a one-dimensional point of view. Just what did the agent order?
100%.
Three, our samples are biased. I don't care. Everyone can say random sample. Give me 10 minutes in your environment. I'll prove to you your sample is biased. It's biased purely by the nature of I, as a QA person, or as an assessor, I have to fill in this form. And to fill in this form, I can't take a call of 30 seconds. So I look
and you have a target to reach.
And the minute you do that, you've biased your sample. And then obviously the age-old debate about sample size. Just how many calls are you quality assessing? And very often in those traditional spaces, it's a tiny percentage. And we have to say, is this a true reflection? Does this number have validity? And do we back it enough? So is there enough science behind this to make it meaningful? So, and that's where technology has started to come into play.
We're going to leap into technology just now, but back to the random call sampling. Now, Nosi, you've been doing random call sampling until you moved over to technology. Just out of interest, what sort of percentages across your 1,300 agents were you selecting for assessments?
It differs. So we've got outbound spaces, some is telco, and then you've got some that is insurance. So it's mostly industry specific or client requested. So on some we'd have to do 20% of the sales, on some we have to do 10% here and 5% there, and then some we actually determine or detect ourselves based on what the company standard is. So it varies. So, but I would say the common one would be an average of 10% of the sales volume. But on some other campaigns or some clients, we have to do non-sales as well, which the artificial intelligence of the AI tool comes in handy because then you don't need people selecting calls that they want, selecting agents that they want. You have a tool that assesses everything. And it's you can trust it. There's no bias. You understand. You can get the true value out of it.
Okay, I'm going to ask you shortly about how you apply the technology in your environment.
Okay, sure.
Tanya, you've come from the last 10 years using various AI tools to extract the data and then interpret data to give you insights to drive change. Why don't you give us a high-level view of that journey that you've covered?
Sure. So I think it started with, so I worked for an outsourcer, and actually they started a customer experience division, and it was headed up by a gentleman called Peter Bloom, who actually was one of the founding members of COPC. So anyone in our industry who knows COPC, very often they are traditionally the founder, I suppose, of standards, right? And kind of the place we go to when we're looking for best practice. And in that space, there was this real challenge. There was exactly this debate. It was this discussion about how do we elevate quality management or quality assurance to a space where it's actually about customer experience management, where it's not transactional and tactical and meaningless. Because why I say meaningless is if that number, and it's always high. And what I love is even when it's low, it's high. I don't know if you've ever, Rod, you've done enough contact center assessments, so I know you know. It's 97 this month, 94 next month. It's never 64. You know, it's always high. If that, and what does it mean? So if you put that into a deck and you send it to your exco, what does it mean? And the point is exactly what Noshihle was referring to earlier, is here you have this opportunity. The contact center, as we all know, is the perfect listening post. If you think about it, you know, for companies, it's the purpose is to leverage data. That's where you have the most, where you got reams and reams of data. And let's be honest, sometimes we get lost in that. But the point is that you have this team, this traditional quality team, who on average are listening to hundreds and hundreds of calls you just heard. But we're not structuring it in a way where we kind of enable them or elevate that job to a place where they're no longer just doing a tick box exercise, but they are actually enabling us to leverage data. They are gathering data in a way that when we look at it, we're able to identify the processes that aren't working for us. We're able to identify where we can drive change. And all of a sudden you have this mind shift from this is almost like I don't want to say, maybe, okay, I'm just going to say it because you know me by now. It moves from I have to do this thing, because anyone worth their while, if you're running a call center, you got to do quality. And it goes to, I need to actually get this right and start to leverage data, because there is power in utilizing this human resource who can understand context, who can apply that, because and we'll unpack that, I'm sure, just now, that a tool is a tool is a tool. I used to work for an amazing man who used to say a fool with a tool is still a fool, right? So a tool is a tool. It's going to do what you ask it to do. And there's power in that. There's merit in that, particularly in the compliance space. Because if you can if you can automate your processes so that you are not just checking 5% or 20% of the sales made, but all of them, you're mitigating risk. And then if you can, and then you don't go, okay, finish, Claire. Now all of a sudden machines have taken over. Quality team is now redundant. No, you pivot. You say, I have these human beings that are capable of so much more. Now, how do I change this team into an analytical team, to a bunch of analysts that can extract data, meaningful data,
and identify those sort of actionable insights that come out of that data.
1,000,000%. And that's what analytics is about, right? Actionable insights, exactly what you're saying. When you put that report in front of someone's, the call center manager's desk or the training manager's desk, it's then saying, guys, you know what? We're not seeing an improvement, but we're not seeing an improvement for the following reasons. And these things are in your control and these things are out of your control. And what's in your control, now go build meaningful performance improvement plans and training plans and coaching plans, because it's based on factual data and you can track that and quantify what space. So if it was a 30-70 split and 30% of the customer dissatisfaction or lack of issue resolution sits in the agent space, you also need to be communicating to your exco that despite all these plans that I'm putting in place, we're only going to see a maximum of a 30% improvement, because this other stuff is outside of
the control of the orbit.
And that's the debate, correct.
Now, you've come from the traditional tick box QA environment. You now have, 60 QAs under your direction, using analytical tools. How has that changed? One of the big questions I have is, have you experienced kickback from agents, knowing that Mbatha is watching, that every single call is being analyzed? How has that impacted your operation?
So the first kickback that we received was, one, they knew we were assessing a specific number of calls. And if we are being honest, it's very easy for somebody to figure out when I'm being assessed or whatever, even though you can change it this month or implement another, but it's very easy for the sales floor. And if I say sales, the salespeople, anybody who's in a sales environment will know how the sales environment people's minds work. They are smart like nobody's business. So they can determine, okay, so I was assessed here, let me give myself another 3 days, then I'm going to be assessed. So they know I'm going to get this amount of assessments for the month, and then after that, you know what? So the first one was, now they know Big Brother is assessing every single call. Already it was like, oh, now, you know, that's the first one. The second one was, because this is an AI tool that transcribes your conversations. We are in Durban, and I think I've said this to you before. We are in Durban where we speak English in 5 different languages, if that makes sense. So everybody pronounces words differently, and you've got other people that speak very fast. We had to then come back to them and say, guys, this is a tool that needs to hear what you're saying. And if this tool is struggling to hear and understand the words that you are saying, imagine what is happening to our customers. So slow down. Slow yourself down, speak clearly. We had to go through a lot of teachings and learnings on speaking. It's not that people can't speak, but you need to speak in a way that the customer can understand you. And you find that once we go into that, the compliance bits as well gets resolved, gets sorted out, and you see an improvement because our customers can understand what we're saying. When we're going through terms and conditions, we're not rushing through, because we need the system to hear, we need the system to understand. And also you need to pass your call. So you need to make sure, speak clearly so you can pass your calls. That's the first, that's the second one. And the third one is, if a human is assessing, we used to get a lot of, oh no, but I've been saying it like this, so why are you marking me down now? And I'm going to use terms and conditions or PPR, for instance. The specific phrases and statements that you need to say as it is without changing or whatever, because you know what can happen. But then somebody is used to, an agent is used to saying that statement, but saying in their own words, or you understand. So when a tool is marking, the tool is going to say, no, you didn't say it, because you didn't say it like how we've built for you to say it. Then they will come back and say, oh no, but if there was a human assessing me, they would be a bit lenient. And so those are some of the challenges that we've had. But we've come a long way, and it's going to be uncomfortable. Anybody who's going through the AI tool journey, it's going to be uncomfortable for the first few months, but it's learnings. Once you come out of that uncomfortability, you fly. I still have the same amount of QAs that I had before. I have not dismissed anybody. I have not retrenched anybody. But what has happened is, we are now able to use the information or provide better insights, instead of just looking at, did you say this, did you say this, did you say it, but we're not getting anything out of it. Now you're able to say, okay, so I see our customers are complaining about, let me see why. And then the guys are still listening to the calls, but they're listening with the different type of listening, with the more, let me get to understand, why are we getting these cancellations, as opposed to saying, did the agent say the cancellation statement? So the agent did say the cancellation statement, so the customer shouldn't cancel, or they should know when to cancel or whatever. But now you've got somebody who's looking at, okay, so the cancellation statement is said, so customers understand the process, but they're still not canceling in time, or if they need to cancel, they're still breaching the time period. So what is the problem? You understand? So there's different ways of assessing. So you use what the AI tool is giving you to better listen and get better insights from a human perspective.
So what I'm picking up from you is that change management is a critical component of the introduction of technology into a QA 100%. And compliance environment 100%. Will need a lot of change. Tanya, we've sort of leapt into the technology without describing it, without looking at specific products. But won't you, as a kind of from a strategic point, just give a high-level overview of your understanding of how speech analytics is being used in the contact center environment today, and the sort of benefits that you see from a strategic point of view?
Sure. I think we've come a long way, because the speech analytic tools of old were one, very expensive. So what you found is there were only a few I guess, blue chip companies or internationals, I guess, that had the pleasure and the budget to afford them. And as a result, it wasn't really common. Secondly, they were quite onerous. They were difficult to work with. So for varying, I guess some were just too complex. So in terms of their programming and how to actually get it right. And what I found in my experience is looking at those environments, they didn't get much out of those tools or out of that investment. They spent more time, like hundreds and hundreds of man hours and using consultants, etc., to continually like create the phrases and try and get the accuracy of the tool to a place where they could rely on the data. And as a result, it's analysis paralysis. You get lost in that world and you just actually never extract
and justify the cost, no doubt. Yeah.
You cannot justify, and also there isn't buy-in. So what happens is then that value is lost. So when you do produce something, it's been so long-winded and maybe you got it wrong so many times that then the call center manager just kind of goes, not interested, or yeah, thank you very much for that report, and just file it. What we have now, the evolution of these tools and the space we find ourselves in, is we now have access to tools and they're affordable. They have language packs that are South African. I mean, we are unique. You cannot tell me you use a tool and yes, but we got an American language pack or a British language pack and that's going to work for us. It doesn't. So now we have access to a tool that, that's affordable, that caters for our dynamics, our accents and languages. So they are actually, more than just the English. And also what happens is, so that what the tool really does is, it gets programmed with what are you looking for? And that's why I do want to make this point, Rod. I find, and we've been alluding to it, but a tool has its place. And I find it has its most meaningful place, and the place where you can demonstrate return on investment most effectively is in the compliance space. There are certain things that have to be said, and they have to be said on every call because they mitigate risk, whether that's the calls are recorded, whether that's DPA, whether that's Noshihle in your world, as you said, the terms and conditions. A tool can go through every single call then, so it can do it in bulk processing and give you feedback very quick, real time, in terms of right now, how are we performing? Are we at 40%, kind of match rate, 50%, 60%? What are your benchmarks? And again, then you've got the team, the human being, that you start to use what we bring to the party. So what do we bring to our party? We bring the ability to listen to something and create context. So what I mean by that, you can tell a tool to listen for anything relating to accounts, account query, account problem, etc. It will do that. But what if the context, Rod, is I phoned last month and I had an account problem. Thank you for fixing it. That was delightful. What I'd like to talk to you about this month is your new product on the market. I just got an email. The tool won't do that. The tool's going to look for account problem or account query. That's what it does. That's why it works so beautifully in compliance, because what do we need to do to mitigate risk? Ensure that we are sticking to those compliance statements. And that's where it works. And what Noshihle said exactly is then you start to work with the tools to say, okay, so if I pick up other words, swear words, complaints, whatever, what's the context around that? Do I get my quality assessors to then go get a decent sample? Do they interrogate that? Is it a group of is it random, lots of agents? Are they specific? Are they repeat agents? So now you start applying your thought process to then say, hey, I've picked up something here and I can analyze this. I can increase the sample size, do it really easy, real time, get reports, and I can go and drive change or make recommendation within the operation.
Back to Noshihle. Now, you've been using the analytics tool for almost a year now, I would think.
Just over a year.
Over a year. Okay. I'd be interested in your perspectives on how valuable is it, particularly in the context of our multiple languages in South Africa and our kind of mixed language conversations that we have. Is it actually working for you in that context?
I would say it is, and I'm lucky enough that I'm in Durban. So Durban is predominantly English and Zulu. We do have Afrikaans here and there, but it's not that big. So it's predominantly English and Zulu agents. So English and Zulu agents will probably speak those languages. It is needed that in every, especially in the outbound call center space, that you have scripts that's going to accommodate for both, because then you'll be able to build your queries and build your identifiers according to what scripts that you have. The Zulu pack is amazing, guys. It's amazing. It transcribes exactly how the agent said. Yes, there will be issues here and there based on how the agent speaks and how fast the agent is, but it transcribes accordingly. It's been valuable, but we've had to come back and say, let's build our own scripts, our own Zulu scripts, so that these agents know exactly what to say, so that we can monitor properly if they are, if there's a direction.
So am I reading right then that you're using the analytics to drive changes in the scripts to get a better outcome?
100%.
Okay. Are you also finding in conversations that you're getting mixed languages? An agent might engage in the vernacular and then switch to an English statement or a phrase in the middle of the conversation.
It's going to happen all the time. It's going to happen all the time because, especially in a sales environment, you want to make your customer comfortable so that they can buy whatever you're selling. So if somewhere down the conversation you realize that this person speaks Zulu, agent is then going to switch into Zulu, but the system switches with you. There's no identify that this is an English call and this is a Zulu call. As long as there is a conversation and there's a language pack attached to that conversation, it switches back as and when it happens.
Tanya, there's an interesting question come in from one of our guests on the floor today about, should companies also use human QAs to pick up on those nuances of tone, sarcasm, emotional detection? What's been your experience in that space? First, Tanya, and then Noshihle, you've also been using the technologies, and I think we'll give some thought to those very human nuances in conversation. How effective are the systems and the tools in that space?
You know what, Rod? So to answer the question, do we have one or the other or both? I think there's absolutely merit in both. But again, you have to say, what is your company strategy and what are your drivers of satisfaction? So why I'm doing that is it's not, there's not a one size fits all. There is a need for companies to say, what is my intent when I set up and create my quality strategy? What am I trying? And invariably, so I'm going to just do it let's just take inbound. Noshihle will talk from a sales perspective. So what you want to do is you want to have an interaction that ultimately results in customer satisfaction. You want the customer to be happy, to stay with you, to recommend you, and you want more of that, right? So the higher satisfaction, the better you're going to perform as a business. And we know it's written in the numbers. So we know the happier the customers, the happier the shareholders ultimately. But why I'm saying this is because we often don't give thought to what is it that's important to my customer, and then in turn, how effectively do I measure that? What is ultimately important to my business, and in turn, how effectively do I measure that? So I'll break that up. Generally, businesses, compliance is right up there. It's important that we mitigate risk. And the ideal is that you listen to as many calls as possible to ensure that the T's and C's have been covered and that we mitigate that. A tool that it works better. Why? Because it's got a broader reach, it does it faster, and it's also quite a meaningless job for a human being to do. To go to certain calls, find a certain thing, a part of a call, and listen, did Tanya now say this X, Y, Z? So there's merit there. On the other side, as I said, I like to think of it as then using the human so this is my experience. We talk about analytical quality assurance, and it comes from my previous life because that's what we built, right? In that space, it's about saying when you use humans, use them properly, leverage the power of that being. And as you said, it's the ability to look at context, pick up nuances. But again, don't do it at an agent level, do it at a business level. Let your team leaders drive performance improvement at an agent level. So stop worrying about I've got a quality team and they must listen to 4 calls per agent per month. No, your quality team needs to take a random sample, proper random sample. They need to figure out what that sample size needs to look like for it to be relevant and for the outputs to be valid and dependable, right? And then you need to say, okay, so what are my drivers of satisfaction? Is it issue resolution? Is it empathy? What is it? And if you want me to, I'll share very quickly. There's been, again, in my COPC world, there was a massive amount of research done, and I think it was over 50,000 research or data points. And the question was, what is important to customers? So what drives satisfaction? What can we quantify as drivers of satisfaction and dissatisfaction? And it didn't matter on the inbound customer care space, whether it was banking, finance, or technology. The feedback was very similar. And put your own hats on now as customers. When you phone into a call center and you're engaging with a company, you want your issue resolved. You want to speak to a person who knows how to do that. And you want to feel important. Now, whether that's you want to feel like there's a human connection, whether you call it empathy, it's about saying I'm valued, and that was a great interaction. They had a bit of a sense of humor. They spoke to me like a human being. They, that type of thing. The drivers of dissat, for example, is if I can't understand you, what you were saying, Noshihle, if you talk too quickly and the customer can't understand you, that's going to cause dissatisfaction because you may have to repeat yourself. You're going to get confused, whatever. It's a driver of dissat. If you don't get to a place of issue resolution quick enough, I hate to use the word handle time, but it's not average handle time. It's not you must do this. It's how long are you putting me on hold? What is this handle time?
You know how I feel about average handle time.
Exactly. But don't get me started on that. If you still have AHT in your agent's KPIs, then I'm firing you.
Oh, wow. Whoa. Good stuff. Okay, I'm going to put you on hold there for a second. Nosy, back to you. The use of technology also begs the question, so you've got your automated QA and automated compliance, scanning 100% of all your calls and spitting out the exceptions, right? Which you would no doubt pass then to your QA team to really listen to those calls.
Yeah.
And that's where I would see them picking up the sarcasms and some of the other pieces which technology will never get. But now I'm going to push you on this one, is what happens from the QA through to the team leader or coaching interventions? How does that work in your environment from a practical point of view? Then I'm going to ask you, Tanya, for your view from a more strategic point of view, the role of coaching and how the role of team leaders may be changing as a consequence of technology being introduced into the QA and compliance space. Nosy, over to you.
So if we go back to the traditional way of assessing, and a QA agent would listen to the call, fill spreadsheets or whatever form of assessment form, and then send it back to the team leader. Team leader will then take the call, listen to it with the agent, and then coach accordingly. And that would happen. Let's say there's a 2-day, 3-day, 4, 5-day delay. If you're using manual, by the time you're able to collate all of this information and send it back to the team leaders, there's a delay. So you're unable to get feedback and implement changes ASAP or coach and see improvement in real time. I think the most important thing here is when we say real time for the AI tool, you at any given point in time, a team leader can log onto the system and see how the performance is going. And when they get reports the next morning, it's not a lengthy process where they have to take the agent away from the dialer. And in our space, that agent being away from the dialer, it means there's no sales coming through. So that the time on the dialer is valuable. So instead of spending 40 minutes or 30 minutes with an agent off the dialer, listening to the call together and then discussing, at any given time, you pull the agent 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or whatever it is, and you say, come, let's look at the transcripts. The system is showing me that you are struggling here. This is where you are failing, or whatever it is. And then you coach at that moment in time. By the end of the day, you're able to let me see if there's progress. So it's working really well from a coaching perspective. But the most important thing is the team leaders need to use the tool. They need to understand what it's about, and they need to see the benefits in it. So for our space, if you are using the AI tool, which I know they are, it has minimized the time taken to coach. That's one, and the time frame that where they get feedback, they're able to get it real time.
So Noshihle, that must have improved efficiency or effectiveness as well. Surely not just efficiency, effectiveness of coaching must have improved.
100%.
And maintaining productivity. So, I mean, there's that balancing act, as you quite rightly said, the agents on the dialer, that's
we need money. It's money.
It's ka-ching, ka-ching.
Yeah.
Tanya, your view on how technologies and the tools that we're talking about now are impacting on the role of the coach or the role of the team leader in wearing their coaching hat?
You know, my view of the importance of the role of the team leader hasn't actually changed in kind of 25 years. And I'll tell you why. In truly effective call centers, and if you have a look at effective teams, the team leader is focusing the majority of their time on performance enhancement activities. They are working with their team, whether that's side by side, whether that's remote, whether it's, I mean, the whole point of kind of enabling team leaders with MIS was not to have them stuck behind their screens and keyboards producing reams and reams of data.
Yeah.
It was to say, use the data to identify where there's opportunities to improve efficiency and effectiveness. That's that balance that we drive in the contact center all the time. It is always going to be about productivity, but it's the effectiveness of that productivity, the outcome that is as equally important. And for me, the team leaders have sometimes, to me, the rise and fall of your contact center sits in the competence of your team leaders. I'm so passionate about that because truly effective team leaders are empowered with information, empowered with tools so that they can work with their team and enable success. There's nothing worse than being an agent and sitting on that call and you don't know the answer and you don't know who to ask and you feel, or even worse, you have to follow the script, but you think you could do better. You could have a better outcome. And and how are you going to get that? You're going to get that by somebody genuinely caring about you and your performance and working with you to improve. And so I think, so to answer your question, I think we got lost somewhere. So that has always been the role of the team leader. And then somewhere along the line, team leaders got very bogged down in task. And all of a sudden we outsourced this role to coaches or to quality teams. And it caused dissension because I report to you, Rod, but you, Noshihle, are coaching me because you're in quality. So what we do is I reject you. Then, Rod, you've got to listen to the call. Now you back me. Now we've got to have a dispute resolution process.
But you know what else happens there? You know what else happens there? And especially in the sales environment, the sales team leaders, number one goal is sales, right? So if you take that responsibility away from the team leader, the quality responsibility away from the team leader, and you give it to the quality team, is the team leader really going to help you drive the quality aspect? So you need to give it to the person who is responsible for that agent, for the team to drive all the metrics that will contribute to the overall.
100%. And again, Noshihle, exactly what you said. And what is important is to say, to demonstrate the value of that. So if they listen to non-sales calls, they can identify why their agents aren't closing and can go and coach and improve performance. So again, it's exactly what you're saying. It's explaining the power of the data, what to do with that data, but fundamentally, It's about driving performance improvements at that agent
100%.
level. And
Okay.
it is the team leader's responsibility.
We're coming up for time, and I think we.
Oh, I've got a question. I don't know if you want me to field that.
Yes. Oh, yes. I did pass that question to you. If you wouldn't mind picking up on that one.
So the question was, let's have a look. If you allow your human QA to focus on your company's strategy, so for example, listening to long calls to see issues or doing deep dives, how do you measure or how do you balance this with productivity as QA targets may be moved? Beautiful question. When you embark on this type of strategy, you have to have a look at all targets and define what is important. So the older productivity, you have to do X amount of assessments in a day, a week, a month, will become moot because it's an input, not an output. All of a sudden, the shift, the QA, I think it's into two courses. The shift has to be, what is the value of that deep dive?
Of what I'm producing.
Output? How do you leverage that? Because if that drives change, if you can demonstrate how changing a process will improve a metric, whatever those, remember, every call center has certain strategic metrics that they're driving, and 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a combination of CSAT and productivity, some balance of quality and productivity stats that everyone's targets, bonuses, increases, and incentives are linked to. It's about how do you add value to that? Because if you demonstrate that input, that number is becoming irrelevant because you're driving value. It's a value-based discussion versus a number discussion. And I think, Rod, just to tie it all together, this discussion
that's what the outcome is about.
Yeah, it's also it links so beautifully into how we all need to be thinking about contact centers. We've been saying it for years. The contact center has to be a value center, not a cost center. And it's up to us. It's up to us, those that play in the space, to demonstrate that value. And it is done
to drive for that change.
Exactly.
Okay. Nosy, your wrap up observations, points of view. Will that share with us your view on the use of technology in QA and compliance? How it might have changed your life.
I don't think we are at a point where we have a choice as an industry. With COVID-19 and everything that has happened, you can't have people at work listening to calls. So the AI tools and technology is really, we are at a time where we have to go the technology way. And we have to, as much as you're still going to have, you can have people working from home, but we have to get away, like Tanya said, we have to get away from listening to a number and looking at the value that comes out of that listening. So yeah, I think it's we're at a point where everybody needs to really look at what technologies they have in their space and what they can implement because of the times that we're living in.
Wonderful. Okay, we're going to wrap now. So first and foremost, it's from me personally and from the Thought Leadership Foundation. Tanya, thank you so much for putting your passion to the test in this session today, and your insights extremely valuable. Nosy, from your point of view, your experience and at the rock face, always great to have perspective of somebody who's actually day-to-day involved, particularly with the high volumes that you're involved, and also your experience in adapting to use of technology in your environment. So thank you very much, both of you, for participation. And thank you very much to the 57 participants who we have logged in today. Thank you for your time and spending time with us. There will be an edited version of the recording of this session available. I'll send that out to all the registrants in a couple of days' time. I will also be writing up a white paper on this session today, almost a sort of a high-level breakdown of what we've been discussing today, and I'll send that out to all the registrants as well. So thank you very much once again, and please, if you haven't already, become a member of the Thought Leadership Foundation. We have a management forum where we have closed groups discussing some of these big issues facing the contact center industry. So once again, thank you to everybody. And we're right on time now. So we've, I think, spent some valuable time together.
And Tanya, you can have your name back now.
Yes, there we go.
You've thrown it around enough, have you?
There we go. Wonderful.
Thank you so much, Rod. Thank you.
Thank
And
you. Rod.
likewise,
Thank
if
you.
any of the attendees wish to contact the panelists, Tanya and Noshihle, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer any further questions.
100%. Just to wrap up, Rod, there was a question from Buyiswa, and I just wanted to say, he said that QA needs to be driven by everyone in the company, and what a beautiful way to end it, to say that 100% quality then becomes a culture. It's building a culture of quality as opposed to just a
Disciplined.
Exactly. So
Wonderful.
fantastic.
Okay, lovely way to end it. So thank you, everybody. And
thank you.
Be safe out there and be positive.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.